morning and good afternoon. My name is John Herbst. I run the Eurasia Center at the Atlantic Council. We're delighted to bring to you right now a truly world-class front page event from the Council. Front page is our premier forum for world leaders. We have an old friend and colleague, Andriy Yermak, the Chief of Staff to the President of Ukraine, who's been on with us before. We're talking about an extremely important subject, the issue of sanctions on Russia for its war crimes against Ukraine. Mr. Yermak has been a close associate of President Zelensky in Ukraine, a distinguished lawyer in both Ukraine and other places before that, and now again here to talk to us about sanctions. Mr. Yermak, over to you, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, John. Thank you for a kind introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for finding time for this very important meeting. And my presentation, I would like to start with a short video. This is the background story, the events which were unfolding and still unfolding, and the destination that we can see for those events.
Before you show the video, I should just point out, I saw it as an excellent encapsulation of why, in fact, we have to have sanctions on Russia. Some of the images of the Russian war brutality are a bit disturbing. Just keep that in mind, but it's very much worth watching. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As of lately, it's become very fashionable to look for analogies to the Russian invasion into Ukraine and the events related to this war. Historical parallels are always inaccurate. This is like, yes, but it's not exactly so. And we can not imagine the future always based on the experience of the past. And so we have the way to the second Lend-Lease and the second front from Munich. That distance was covered within a month. But it is very strange that we have the attempts to present Ukraine as the opposition to the second best army in the world, comparing Ukraine with the Czech Republic. This is not the case. I would like to issue a signal warning. We will never give up. And nobody in the world can want peace as much as we do. But we need just peace. We need fair peace. Peace at any cost is not our choice. We weren't the ones who started this war, who captured somebody else's territories, but we have to bring our own back to where it belongs. This is Kherson, this is Donetsk, Luhansk, and Sebastopol, for that matter. This is all Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity are not a bargaining chip for us. And this approach failed in 1938, and now it cannot succeed. Um, the political culture of Russia does not provide for dialogue. The basis for their culture is terror, blackmail, and pressure. And we can say the language of force. And so, in order to avoid this war turning into a regional one or the world one, for that matter, we have to employ just one thing. We have to help Ukraine win in this war as soon as possible. First of all, with the arms, with the military equipment, and using this opportunity, I would like to say that we are very thankful to President Biden's administration, the bilateral support of Ukraine and the nation of the United States for the assistance thus provided, for the unprecedented historic support and the inspiring example for other nations. America has proved again that the United States is the leader of the world. Having united the democratic powers to resist the Russian aggression against Ukraine. We would like to thank you for Lend-Lease. Your military equipment is saving every minute, every second, thousands of lives in Ukraine, not just of our soldiers, but also of civilians. Because for the Russian terrorists who call themselves the military, civilians are also absolutely legitimate targets. As well as the assets of our infrastructure. And that means that any weapon of Ukraine is defensive. In our hands, for our allies in the United States and in Europe and elsewhere, we have to confirm this, and they know it well by now. And I have to tell you that we still need heavy military equipment, heavy arms. We need high precision rockets and missiles, drones, systems of air defense, munition and ammunition, and many other things. And most importantly, we are still waiting for the MLRS. Well, this acronym, I will remember it for the rest of my life. We are still waiting for such systems. And at the first critical stage of this war, we wasted too much time on talks, on reconciliation, looking for the military equipment to be supplied. At that time, people with bare hands in our municipalities would stop the tanks invading. Now we have this chance for complete liberation of Ukraine, of this aggressor. We cannot procrastinate. We have two different potentials with Russia. So the liberation war of Ukraine, war for freedom, cannot and should not be turned into the war until last Ukrainian dies, because that won't stop the war either. If they succeed, the Russian cosplayers club will continue reconstruction of the empire. And so Ukraine is now between Russia and the free world. We are not protecting just ourselves, not just the democratic values. We are defending the customs of the West, the way of life, because despite the expectations of the short-sighted politicians, it won't be preserved in this situation. And there are constituents will ask them uneasy questions about the betrayed heroes and so forth. But we don't care what the answers will be then. We need weapons now without any limitations, urgently, immediately. I would like to reiterate, we are very grateful, extremely grateful for the land lease. But let me use the baseball term. This is the first base. And we are navigated not just on the home run, for the home run, in grand span is our final target. We have to go on, and all the bases should be taken. So the second thing I would like to mention here is the sanction pressure being increased. In order to make Russia stop the war, we have to take the resources away from it. Financial, technical, technological, we need more aggressive financial and energy sanctions. I think that John was very clear, and he knows well that our president started the initiative for the sanction group. That was back in March. And after consultations with our great friend of Ukraine, Michael McFaul, we decided to create that group, and I'm happy that the Atlantic Council joined the hunt. And we have put together a team of great international Ukrainian experts. Michael and myself are co-chairs on that group, so they call it the Yermak McFaul group now. It's working on needs assessment as far as the sanctions are concerned and performance analysis for the sanctions. Presently, we can say that we have certain results of our group work. We have already promulgated 2 reports, 2 documents on the sanctions needed and how we can implement them. Those documents or policy papers are to be used for the sanction policy as manuals. I don't have much time, so let me say that there are just some key areas. The United States, the EU, and other democratic forces have contributed a lot, but the majority of this work is still ahead of us. The Kremlin will only be affected by a complete embargo for the energy resources coming from Russia, because that's the source of their imperial ambitions, and at the same time, a geopolitical weapon they use. As we warned the world at the beginning of the Nord Stream 2 project. Unfortunately, at that point, not everyone heard us. So now we have a unique chance to ruin within a very short span the energy dictatorship of Russia. This is remodeling the energy consumption of Europe. This is self-protection, investment to the future development with green energy, the energy freedom and energy sovereignty. Energy democracy, it's key for the future, in our opinion. So it's necessary to have the blocking sanctions against all the Russian banks, starting with the biggest ones. Settlements in rubles for natural gas are totally unacceptable. This is disconnection from the payments systems and freezing the assets and subsequent confiscation. All the sanctions should be reconciled and synchronized so that we can reach the maximum of efficiency. For that, we need the secondary sanctions mechanisms against jurisdictions, companies, and private individuals who are helping Russia evade. And there, the United States can play their crucial role. Now, the third area, third base, this is economic assistance to Ukraine. We, without any exaggeration, are astonished by the yesterday decision of Senate on the 40 billion additional for Ukraine. And we are enormously grateful for the support that has been provided so far. And we hope for the assistance in our after the war reconstruction. We need comprehensive reanimation activities like the Marshall Plan and opening of the markets of our allies and partners for the Ukrainian merchandise that could provide an impetus for further um, rehabilitation of our economy. The after-war Ukraine is not just a matter of faith, it's a matter of conviction. Will be a big construction site, so the field for innovation and investment. This is the chance for us to build a global showcase of success in democracy, a whole community of democracies with infrastructure, technology, and of course the values serving the purpose. This is an open window of opportunity. The credit of trust for Ukraine is now incredible. We paid the highest price for that development, human lives, thousands of human lives. And because of that, the world could see that the conflict between the policy of values and real politics can be overcome. And those people who support Ukraine now are making their value choice, but this choice will bring dividends. Even Hollywood, the Silicon Valley, know about such notions, and they are with us with their hearts and their spirit and their projections for the future. This is entrepreneurship, because we are the land of the brave now, the land of the sincere people, genuine people. President Zelensky, our fighters, and all the Ukrainian nation are proving that every day. At the same time, justice tells us that the aggressor should pay for the reconstruction as long as possible. So reparation and compensation is a matter of a great concern, with a legitimate international mechanism to compensate for the damage done by Russia, and that will be operational despite the categorical refusal to cooperate. Now, President Zelensky created a task force that I lead personally, our and international experts, Jeremy Sharp, Martin Kuchkinsky, Amar Kruk, and many other people are working on this mechanism, and very soon we will be presenting it officially. We have home base means that we have to preserve and sustain what we will gain. Ukraine is a stronghold of democracy in Europe. We need security, we need guarantees of security. It is necessary for this war to become the last war, definitely, for Europe. And in Moscow says that they are fighting the West. The West should pick up the gauntlet and do everything necessary for Ukraine to win, to restore its territorial integrity and sovereignty. And Russia should not try to get any revenge in the future. Talking about the guarantees, security guarantees for ourselves, we are not asking, we are suggesting investments into our joint future. And what are the guarantees that we see? The war taught us a lesson. We just believe in facts. And the facts are, we are living on the ruin of the world order, because Russia's presence on the Security Council on the United Nations negates the United Nations. The OSCE has no point. So NATO is the only organization capable of providing the safe security umbrella. It is available for everyone, not for Ukraine. So we have to look for other options, because our deterrence of Russia is the mission here. It can be an agreement or a system of covenants with the obligations of the parties to prevent any war, to develop some approaches to solving this problem. We need an expert discussion at the international level. I think some of the people attending this meeting are prepared to competently join this kind of discussion. So we'll be happy if you agree to do so and give us a notice of agreement to that effect. With the Budapest Memorandum, we learned the lesson that any guarantor should be legally binded, and such legally binding documents should be ratified by the parliaments. We cannot see Russia among such guarantors. The basis of their policy is terror and systemic violation of basic norms of the international law. Ukraine has proved its stamina in the battlefield, and so for our own protection, we need this cornerstone of security guarantees. No guarantees of security from the third parties cannot completely replace the powerful defense potential for Ukraine. So we expect the guarantors to provide for that, especially with the lifting of the all politically arranged limitations and policy-related limits to integration in the security and defense interplay. There was that old decision of Europeans not to irritate the Kremlin. That's why we are not a member of NATO, but we can reinforce the Baltic and Black Sea alliance. And deep inclusion of Ukraine into the multilateral formats, which will improve its integration with the international community, constitute a substantial security factor. And we cannot agree to any kind of alternative like joining the EU instead of that. The sanction policy should be continuous and should be very flexible. This is another safeguard in the realm of security. That set of activities is basic for us. It can serve as the test field or test for creation of the world coalition of responsible states, which will be able within 24 hours to respond to any kind of aggression efficiently. I would like to remind you that President Zelensky in March suggested that format of cooperation. We called it U24 or United 24. At the global level, the system guarantees security. It can lay foundation for construction and design of a totally new architecture in international relations, reform of the Constitution and with Westphalia principles of respect for sovereignty. And the United States could play an important part in that process, creating another model of a global leadership for themselves. And the last but not least, I'm coming back to some historical parallels that we can hear very often about. In 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait. One people, one state, that was the slogan. And we know the end of it. We know how it was all concluded. We can say that this is not about history. This is without any doubt about the future. Using this opportunity, I would like to thank you on behalf of all Ukrainians for supporting us, for working and making your own contribution. I'm convinced that very soon we will see the Ukrainian victory, not just for Ukraine, but our joint victory. Thank you very much for your attention, and I am prepared to render your questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Yermak, for a very broad presentation. Sanctions were a large part of it, but not all of it. I think I'll focus on sanctions, but first, you started off by talking about security, the importance of American and other NATO weapons supply to Ukraine. But you said there are certain things you need right now which you're not getting. and you specifically mentioned multiple rocket launchers. Could you explain why you think this is necessary, and why do you think you're not receiving these as promptly as you need?
You know, John, on many occasions now, I answered this very question. Quite honestly, I don't know. Even when I talk about our being grateful, our gratitude, I believe, and the Ukrainians believe that we have that President Biden is very sincere. We received in Ukraine, and we were very much impressed with the sincerity and friendly attitude from Speaker Pelosi and the Secretary of State, Mr. Blinken, and Secretary Austin. And I am in continuous cooperation with Mr. Sullivan. You know that this is very good, but we have no MLRS. I don't know how to answer this question convincingly. So I would like to just say, using this opportunity, that this is the equipment that is key for lives of our people. This is the battle that continues every minute in Donbass. This is hell, indeed. And there is this unceasing, bloody battle 24/7. That's why presently any kind of stop, any kind of time, unless we get it, we'll be losing many lives of our heroes. That's my answer to your question, John.
All right, thank you. I'll just add that I don't have any doubt that you need those missiles in order to help push Russia out of the territory they've taken since February 24, and we need to get them to you quickly. All right. Let's now come to the main conversation on sanctions. Experts say that sanctions are going to cost the Russian economy 12.5 to 16.5% of growth this year. In other words, they'll lose that amount of growth. Is this sufficient to weaken the Russian economy and the Russian military in ways that help you defeat Russian aggression in Ukraine?
Yes, you're absolutely right. Suggesting that indeed, presently, we can see the figures you were referring to, how the sanctions affect the growth rate of Russian economy. But we have to urge Russia to stop this war. And this is only possible with the downsizing of the available resources. And if any country buys the Russian goods, they are indirectly finance the military apparatus conducting this aggression against Ukraine. And I would like to share the figures starting from the 24th of February, the very beginning of the aggression. The European Union on a daily basis paid Russia more than 800, just think about it, more than $800 million every day for importation of the Russian natural gas and oil. With such money, with that kind of cash, they can pay for the war, they can afford the war and the aggression. And we have to say that the sanctions, unfortunately, have this postponed effect. They are not working immediately. So the sanctions should be reinforced and as soon as possible. So we expect the adoption of the sixth package of sanctions from the EU. And there, the question about the sanctions, I always answer, if this terrible war continues, that will mean that the sanctions were not enough. And I would like to thank you and all the contributors to our group with Michael Matnick for the great work, for the great job you did. And I'm thankful to everyone. And the documents were officially referred to, we were referred to Speaker Pelosi and Secretary of State Blinken, the President, and many secretaries and prime ministers of the world. So this is the group that I hope will work efficiently in the future also.
Okay, thank you. All right. You referred to in your set talks as well as just now the money that Europe sends to Russia for purchasing oil and gas. It looks like the EU is committed to, over the course of a year, ending all such purchases of hydrocarbons from Russia. Is that fast enough? And what is the alternative for Europe if they're not buying from Russia?
I can tell you that on the 9th of May, yes, we had lots of discussions, and especially when we talk about the EU specifically, undoubtedly, there should be that reconciled position of many countries. There are many positive signals issued by Japan that agreed to the embargo. Finland announced its preparedness for stopping the importation of natural gas. Poland abandoned the Russian coal, but we have to think and work on different mechanisms. On May 9, our group promulgated the step-by-step plan with the precise recommendations for the European Union for implementation of the energy sanctions. And there we demonstrated how it was possible to minimize the super profit of Russia coming from oil for the grace period or transition period, and how we could have that stage-by-stage embargo for importation of the natural gas from Russia. That is about the regulated import duty or tariff, and also saving the money on escrow accounts, the money coming from such sales and purchases. We appreciate the initiative of the US government and the EU on implementation of duties for the Russian oil. I think that money that's collected can be contributed to the reconstruction fund for Ukraine. And also, we have lots of proposals for the future, for the additional, the alternative, for the tax mechanism and special constraints, sanctions against suppliers of services for the maritime experts, exporters, and the controlled sales regime. I think we can kill two birds with a stone. This limits the super profits gained by Russia that get fed into the military apparatus of Russia, and that, by the same token, this minimizes the shock stresses for the economy of some EU countries. But let me say this, we cannot today compare financial economic issues and the issues of death and life for people, security issues, in other words, because if we cannot stop this war, we will have to pay with a much higher price for its continuation. So another point, we are convinced that the longer this war lasts, the more will be the risks of other states joining the war. First of all, I mean the Baltic states, Poland, and other countries which have borders with the Russian Federation. And this is something that we should not forget about. This is not a matter of years, mind you, because in some offices they decided that it was very convenient for the owners of those offices for the war to last as long as possible. But we are talking weeks, maybe months, but not longer. So I would like to reemphasize that all this complex military equipment plus sanctions plus other assistance will provide for Ukraine provide Ukraine with the opportunity to win in this wars and win quickly.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I just want to make one point endorsing what you just said. There's some critics in the U.S. who say, why should we be giving $40 billion of aid to Ukraine? And the only reason they can say that is they don't realize that Putin's objectives go beyond Ukraine. They go towards our Baltic NATO allies, maybe Poland. And so the smart play for the United States is to provide that assistance to you so you can beat the Russians on your soil. Okay, one last question on sanctions, and then we'll turn to audience questions. Export controls are an important part of the sanctions package. We are hearing reports that Russia is having trouble producing tanks and other military equipment because of these controls. Are you seeing this on the battlefield?
I'm very thankful to John for this extremely important point. Indeed, it is very true that we have completely make Russia impotent of any kind of manufacturing, military equipment. And diving deep into history, we can remember then when the West disarmed Ukraine at the beginning of our independence. It so happened, unfortunately, and this sounds as a paradox, that part of the weapons went to Russia. And for all those years, we were thinking that the Russian military machine that had the opportunity to make procurements of new technologies and the elements was getting ready. And we now know what was the ultimate goal of that preparation. Now we have to draw our conclusions, all of us. And indeed, presently, regardless of the sanctions imposed back in 2014, tanks, aircrafts, and other types of Russian equipment, we can see on the battlefield them upgraded and equipped with the European equipment, and some pieces are stuffed with a very high percentage of equipment manufactured not in Russia but in the EU and other countries. We can see now that the sanctions are really at work. As far as we know, indeed, Russia has this deficit now, some shortage and problems with the repair of their equipment, and some production lines have been closed, but they have so many pieces of that equipment. I can tell you that at the beginning of this war, the convoys of tanks were coming in, and that lasted for hours, scores of kilometers. And now they have accumulated such a number of that equipment that the real efficiency that could make it stop the war is far away. And we have to try to achieve that. Thank you very much for this question. And this is part of our recommendations concerning the sanctions.
Do you have any specific ideas or proposals for additional steps in export controls that might help?
We think that it is necessary to expand the set of prohibited dual-use items for export to Russia. And it is very important to stop cooperation in the field of scientific research that serves as a disguise for supplies of assembly parts for the military equipment. These are the 2 points that I would like to make here.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think we'll now turn to audience questions. We do have a great many of them in the queue. I'll start with one from Joe Morley Davies. Mr. Yermak, thank you for your time. My question is, what message should be taken to 9 aligned countries around the world who feel or seem to feel they have no stake in this fight?
Ви маєте на увазі, не приєдналися до санкцій? Я думаю, що сьогодні...
I think for the non-aligned countries, this is not just a war between Ukraine and Russia. This is the war between good and evil. If you don't believe in such notions, please come to Ukraine. If you have any doubts what they did to Bucha, Irpin, Borodyanka, see with your own eyes the chronicles of Mariupol. I think this is a challenge for all the future world. This is a challenge, I think the countries which depend very much on food programs also will feel it if we cannot deblock it. There is a risk of that deblock our ports, seaports, and very soon they will detect some kind of food pressure, foodstuffs crisis. What is at stake here is security, not just military security, but also foodstuff security, environmental security. And we know what was happening at our nuclear power plants, how they bombarded them, and how practically we were the hairbreadth separated us from a disaster. And President Biden was informed of that when Chechens from Russia took the biggest NPP in Europe, and we were just one little step away from the tragedy which is bigger than Chernobyl accident exponentially. And we cannot mention here any country that has no stake in this war, at present or in the future. Because if we can frankly say, how many countries in the world are prepared, like us, for 86 days, say, hold the line and even liberate some territories which were occupied originally. 86 days of this fight, without being a NATO member, without being an EU member. Yes, with great support, with unprecedented historic support of the world, but still, 86 days we have been fighting, and we will keep fighting till the victory. Very few countries in the world can say the same and can put their name to this statement. So this is the principal answer to the question why we have to be concerned, aligned or non-aligned in Lisbon, or in Asia or in Africa, Latin America, because if we do not stop the aggressor will proceed. There is never enough for the aggressor. Let's remember the Second World War in that respect. Thank you very much.
All right, you mentioned the question of food shortages, and this is a very, very important question which is receiving more attention by the moment. Secretary Blinken brought this up at the UN this week. The Economist has it on its front page. Tell me, how much grain do you have that you're trying to export, that you're unable to export because of the Russian naval blockade of Odessa, and for that matter, Russian efforts to destroy your agricultural production?
John,
we are doing a lot already with the help of the UN, and this problem is a great concern for the Secretary General of the UN, Mr. Guterres, with the United States, with the UK, with the EU, with Turkey's support. We are all working on looking for a way out of this difficult situation. I sincerely hope that it will be found and soon, and we'll be able to overcome such problems. And we have to stop any kind of development for the foodstuffs crisis. But the countries which are dependent on this export directly on their own part, they should also issue some signals of concern. Their voice should be heard. They should have a say stating that they are unhappy with this situation. They cannot stay neutral because indeed, I can repeat that. This is not a conflict, a dispute. This is a war between evil and good. Unfortunately, I think that this is a token of our world continuing to exist because common people, citizens of the world, without any hesitation, took side of the light and good. And politicians should follow their constituents in that choice. I think this is the first commandment for any kind of politician, because if you lose your touch with the people, with the nation, with the constituents, I think it's very doubtful that they have any prospects of political survival.
Thank you. We have a question from Nana Sajaya. Mr. Yermak, could you please tell us about your efforts on so-called secondary sanctions? Are you seeking for imposing sanctions on individuals or entities that are helping Russia to evade sanctions? And who are they?
Yes. This is a very important question because indeed we can adopt very serious sanctions, but there is always a loophole represented by a country or an individual trying to help them out. And we are being very open about this, and we can prove that some jurisdictions, some companies, some individuals are betting Russia in this circumvention of sanctions, because such sanctions, we have a lot of respect for our partners taking the risk, exposing themselves with these sanctions, economically and otherwise. It's not fair when somebody negates such sanctions and makes some money on that to boot. Unfortunately, these are some Asian countries. We were very much taken aback seeing some attempts like that friend from such friendly country traditionally as Georgia, which is in the same boat on that blacklist, so to speak. But we are very careful, and we are learning from this with our partners. It should be hearsay. It should be all proved. It should be all documented, corroborated, but without any doubt, this is a very important element of the secondary sanctions. And I'm sure that they already appear with the packages coming from the European Union and the EU, the UK. This will grow, this will increase, because, you know, if we start talking about such country as Georgia, for example, we know that some influential business people having their say in that country, in Georgia. They are big shareholders of Gazprom, and I think there is a big risk I think they are involved in aiding and abetting those sanctions. That's why we continue our dialogue with such agents, such countries, and we are supported by our partners. I'm very grateful again, the UK, the US, of course, the EU. And this work is to be continued anyway.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from, let's see, Zinovy Broida. The question is, what is your vision for Ukrainian integration into Three Seas Initiative as one of the most efficient tools for Ukraine's progress, including financing?
Як я вже сказав, я вважаю, що
As for I have already mentioned that this is about time when Ukraine joins as many financial, economic communities, and there are our cooperation with the IMF, the EBRD, the World Bank, and we think that this cooperation should be expanded. Ukraine should join in a more powerful way the financial markets. I can see the powerful signals being issued. We are welcome there, and there is trust in our country there. So I think that this process will continue, and there will be progress. We are open for any kind of suggestions. Our government, the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Economy, we're in the mode of continuous consultations with our partners. So I think that by the end of this year, also, we'll join many financial institutes, international institutions, financial institutions, and first of all, financial, of course, the financial markets of the world.
Thank you. We have a question from Jack Krupansky. He says, how long will the new $40 billion aid package from the United States last? And how much more will it take for Ukraine to fully win and fully push Russia out of Ukraine?
I think there is no final answer to this question. No one can tell. I think that we should hope that that will be enough. It depends on how long this war lasts, and that in turn will depend on the expedient supplies of weapons and the effectiveness of the sanctions being introduced. Our people proved that we were capable warriors, and we demonstrated how our nation could fight. I think that that's our common interest, even if there are some skeptics still thinking that, well, perhaps this should be continued till the last Ukrainian. But let me say it again. Everyone should understand by now that we are fighting till the victory, for the victory. That means that we won't stop. And Russia, that will feel their advantage, if they feel it, and the West postponing supplies of the necessary equipment, and they will be more aggressive. And that will lead for sure to the situation when the countries bordering with Russia will be exposed and finally involved in that war, NATO countries at that. So NATO will be forced to fight with Russia. And this is what everyone is talking about. The sky is not closed because we do not provoke Russians, and that would mean direct involvement in the war for the NATO nations, yes. But if this war continues, that will become an inevitable term. So it's either NATO demonstrates that they cannot fight, but we do not believe in such an option, or NATO will have to fight. If NATO has to fight, then the NATO countries and people in those countries will come to the front line just to fight Russians face to face. What will be their question to their governments, do you think? Because they are witnessing all the developments. My son, my husband went to war. Why? Why it had to come to this? Why didn't you provide the necessary support to Ukraine that demonstrated its capacity to fight? They fought for months. They were shouting from the roofs, and now nobody took any heed, and we have to fight ourselves. So that's what will happen. So it's not about words. It's about reality. It's about developments of this reality. The sooner we win, the sooner all the intelligent, adequate people will win. People who want to live in a free, democratic, civilized world. And we prove that every day, believe me. So let's not repeat the mistakes. I understand that for many years it was the case that there was a lot of mistrust, lack of trust in Ukrainian politicians for that matter. But presently our people, our nation, our president have demonstrated to the whole world, and we are very happy that our attitude towards us is that of respect, as that of equality and equity, partnership. It took us 30 years to achieve this state, and undoubtedly, unfortunately, this is becoming a reality under such grave, sometimes horrible circumstances. But let's not be trapped in this situation again. Let's give no chance to such development.
Mr. Yermak, thank you very much for your answer. We've already gone over time, and that's actually an excellent question to end on. So thanks for joining us today. We hope to host you in the future, as we have before. And we wish you great luck as you perform your historic mission. And thanks to everybody for tuning in. And
Задоволенням.
It's been my pleasure, John. And thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for your care for my country. And we will never forget your involvement. We shall overcome someday together. Glory be to Ukraine.
Indeed. And on June 1, we're presenting a paper by Andriy Yermak explaining how Russia is responsible for the global food shortage by its war on Ukraine. Thank you all very much for attending.